Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the MMA Sucka podcast. I'm Frazer Krohn, the editor and writer at MMA Sucka, and as you can probably tell, I'm on my own today. My co-host Tim isn't feeling great, so he's taking a rain check today, so it'll just be me. So expect a slightly shorter podcast, but bear with me. There's plenty to talk about this week. We've got the boxing from the weekend, we've got Bellator from the weekend, UFC from the weekend, and then we've got a blockbuster UFC card coming up this weekend as well. Um, so we'll jump straight into it. Jack Catterall versus Josh Taylor is the biggest story from coming out of the boxing world this week, and it's tired. It's tired boxing. Josh Taylor officially wins the bout 2-1 on the judges' scorecard by split decision, and retains his belts. But with that being said, he didn't win that fight. I think it was clear for all to see. Paddy Power, one of the big betting companies in the UK, said that they will be refunding any bets that were cashed on Jack Catterall to win, because it was so clear that he won the fight. You don't want to throw out the word robbery too much in combat sports, because a lot of these fights where you may not agree with the decision, they're tight fights. They could have gone either way. This one was clear. I think Howard Foster is the only judge that I think got it correctly. Scored it 113, 112 to Jack Catterall. I'd argue that it was actually 114, 111 in favour of Jack Catterall. But there was no chance. Ian John Lewis scored it 114, 111 to Josh Taylor. There is absolutely no chance that was the score. Josh Taylor was out jabbed, he was outworked, he was the slower fighter in there. Did the weight cut get to him? He said that he made weight with ease, but we know that he struggles to get down to that weight nowadays. He was just outworked, and it was in his hometown, and maybe the pressure of fighting at home for the first time since the pandemic got to him. But let's. All I want to say is, let's be honest, he didn't win the fight, and it's frustrating from a boxing point of view, because now that tires boxing. Everyone, it's clear to see that Jack Catterall won the fight, and there's, I'd have to take a lot of convincing for someone to tell me that Josh Taylor did win that fight. And as much as I don't want to give him props, Jake Paul actually came up with quite a good idea. He tweeted earlier, I'll just read it out. I think there should be 6 boxing judges for title fights, 3 pairs of 2. Each pair has to agree on the same score at the end of the round, and if they don't, they briefly debate their reasoning. Why not? These judges have got to have some accountability for why they're scoring the fights in the way that they are, because 114, 111 to Josh Taylor is absurd. And like I said, the bout wasn't a complete whitewash of a sort of a 12-0 on the rounds. There was tight rounds in there, and I think Jack Catterall was suffering from being slightly lazy on the break and getting caught with big shots from Josh Taylor on the break, which were kind of eye-catching because he had his hands down. But with that being said, he scored the knockdown I think it was in the 8th round. He had the point deducted, but then Josh Taylor had a point deducted a little later on in the fight. What I would say is that the referee, I think it was Marcus McDonald, I can't remember off the top of my head, I thought he was awful. He was too involved. The best referees are the ones that you don't hear about, and he was far too involved in the fight. But there's a there's a lot of talk around this. Will there be a rematch? Will there won't? Will there not? And Josh Taylor himself has said that it's likely going to be his last fight at the super lightweight weight, and he'll likely move up to face the Terence Crawfords or the Errol Spencers of this world. The next title fight for the super lightweight championship, the undisputed championship, needs to involve Jack Catterall. He is the uncrowned champion at the moment, and this has put a massive stain on British boxing. And it's the British Boxing Board of Control that really need questioning. You know, we have fighters in the ring after they've just been, you know, gone through 35 minutes of hell sometimes, and they're interviewed straight away. So why can't we interview these judges? Why can't we interview the referee, saying why, you know, ask the referee why he didn't let the two guys fight on the inside, why he took a point away from Josh Taylor. For realistically, the point was taken from Josh Taylor when at the end of the round, Josh Taylor sort of, you know, it was a lazy, I wouldn't even call it a hook. It was just it was more like a lazy, just little punch to the body of Jack Catterall when Jack was on his way back to the corner. Josh was on his way back to the corner, almost just saying, you know, good job, little punch in the stomach. And yet he takes a point off Josh Taylor for that. It was shocking refereeing. And yeah, these judges need to come out and show some accountability, because, you know, if Ian John Lewis says, you know, the tides around, he comes out and says, oh, I scored it like this because X, Y, Z. You know, we don't all have to agree with him, but at least then he puts his point of view across. But you know, we don't have that luxury. So, you know, it's still quite raw, especially for Jack Catterall. So we'll see in the coming weeks what the fallout of that will be. Whether we'll get an official announcement from Josh Taylor that he will be moving up. You know, he did say after the fight that he more than likely will be, but you know, he's just gone through 36 minutes, sorry, and probably was a little bit in shock that he actually did win the fight. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll be updating you on MMA Sucka all week as to what the fallout from that is, because, you know, like I say, it's a world-renowned talking point inside of boxing, and something, you know, this is it now. Something has to be done. These judges have to take accountability for it, and if they don't, you know, people are going to start wanting to come to the UK to box. You know, yes, both Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor are from the UK, so it was an easier fight to make. But you've got to consider, you know, the Terence Crawfords of this world, the Canelo Alvarezes of this world. Are these guys going to want to come over to the UK? You know, the bigger names, the Deontay Wilders, the Alexander Usyk again. Are these guys going to want to come over to the UK to box, knowing that they're probably going to, you know, potentially get a tough decision? I don't think they are, and rightfully so. You know, these guys, they don't deserve to be penalised against because they want to fight in the UK. It's ridiculous. So yeah, we'll keep you updated in the coming weeks. But with that being said, don't leave it in the hands of the judges, and that's exactly what we saw from Bellator this weekend. Gegard Mousasi got the TKO victory over Austin Vanderford in the main event of Bellator Dublin. Can't quite remember the numbered event for it, but we all know it was Bellator Dublin. And what a victory it was. You know, me and Tim last week said that it was Bellator 275. So yeah, me and Tim said last week, Gegard Mousasi is simply too experienced. You know, Vanderford is a phenomenal fighter. You know, 11-0 going into the bout. But Gegard Mousasi's seen this before. He's fought wrestlers before. He's fought strikers before. He's fought jiu-jitsu guys before. He's fought brawlers before. You aren't gonna surprise Gegard Mousasi with anything in there, and that's exactly what we saw. And you know, it was a TKO within, I think it was a minute 25 into the bout. Gegard Mousasi gets a TKO. Phenomenal performance by Gegard, and you know, he shows that he's still got it at his age. You know, I think he's 36 now. Sorry, he's still got it, and he, you know, now we have to be questioning whether he is one of the best middleweights in the world, regardless of promotion. You know, we've got obviously, you know, Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker in the UFC. I think it's this, you know, these guys, you know, these guys are the best in the world. There's no denying that. But then, you know, we've got one championships, Reina Derrida. Is he one of the best in the world? You know, you'd argue that maybe because of the competition that he faces, he potentially, that's where he's almost being let down in his level of competition. But you can only beat what's in front of you. And with regards to Gegard Mousasi at the weekend on Friday night, he not only beat Austin Vanderford, but he put manners on him. He dominated the fight, and then he had Vanderford shot for the takedown, big sprawl, and then that was the beginning and the end, and Mousasi retains the title. What's next for Vanderford? He'll without a doubt come again. I think depending on how the Fabian Edwards Lyoto Machida fight goes in May, I think if Machida wins that, he probably faces Machida, to be honest. And like I said, I think he goes again. This isn't the last we'll see of Vanderford. I don't think it's the last we'll see of Vanderford in a title fight. What I would say is, as long as Gegard Mousasi's Bellator middleweight champion, that's kind of, that's it for Vanderford. He doesn't beat Mousasi. Mousasi beats Vanderford every day and twice on Sundays, as it were. He's just the much better fighter, the much more well-rounded fighter, and it's going to be a long road back for Vanderford, but I can see him. I can see him back in a title fight at some point. But like I say, as long as Gegard Mousasi's in the Bellator or middleweight division, I don't think Vanderford holds the title. In the co-main event, we obviously saw Sinead Kavanagh and Mccourt face off. We were a little bit harsh on this fight, I think, last week, saying Mccourt's stand-up is amateurish, but that showed. We saw Sinead Kavanagh have the injury. I think it was in the first or second round, and Mccourt did exactly what she needed to do. And as brutal as it sounds, attack that injury. You've got a wounded animal in front of you, and you want to attack that injury. But it was a leg injury, a knee injury, and Mccourt was kicking the leg of Sinead Kavanagh, but with no real conviction. They were sort of more slaps than kicks with the leg, and it didn't make sense why Mccourt didn't. Even if she doesn't particularly train heavy leg kicks, put everything you can into a leg kick against a wounded opponent, an injured opponent, and more than likely, the referee might even step in and stop it. But what we did see is Sinead Kavanagh be able to adapt on the fly, something that the SBG team is famous for, adapting, and overcoming the adversity. And she took the fight to the floor and was able to get the unanimous decision victory. Scott Coker did mention a Sinead Kavanagh versus Chris Cyborg 2 fight. We don't need to see that. Their first fight wasn't competitive. And obviously it was, that was only in November of last year. And it was a TKO or KO within the first 2 minutes of the fight, from what I remember. There's got to be more competitors for Cyborg to face. She doesn't need to face Sinead Kavanagh again. Let Kavanagh go away and get another 1 or 2 victories, and then come back and see, if she can hang with Cyborg, because like I say, that the first fight wasn't competitive in the slightest. And there's not a great, I think it would do awful numbers, because there's not a great pool to see that again. For Mccourt, I think she she's the sweetheart, as it were, of the Bellator women's division. She's constantly on the broadcast. She's not a bad fighter by any means, but she's not, in personal opinion, I don't think she's anywhere near the level of these top girls. She's ranked number 4 in the division, or that'll change around because it hasn't been done. But the Bellator rankings, I don't want to make this into a me going in on the Bellator rankings, but you've got Jessica Borger, who's 3 and 4, ranked number 9. You've got Mccourt, who's 6 and 2 now, ranked number 4. You've got Jana Harding, who I think is one of the better fighters in the division, ranked number 6. Pam Sorensen 9-4, ranked number 7. Chris Cyborg's the champion, and she's going to be the champion as long as she wants to be the champion. It's the same with Valentina Shevchenko in the women's flyweight division in the UFC. No one's taking that bout from her unless she relinquishes it. It's a difficult one for Leah Mccourt. I think she probably faces, she definitely drops down in the rankings, but I wouldn't be surprised to see her face either a newcomer to the division or number 10 ranked Diana Silva. For Sinead Kavanagh, she needs to fight a Kat Zingano or a Jana Harding next, and then fight Chris Cyborg. Like I say, the first fight wasn't competitive, so I don't quite see what the pull is for another fight between the two ladies. Because, like I say, if it was a war where the two went back and forth, and it was there was knockdowns apiece, and it wasn't competitive. So and I don't think, like I said, I think it would do awful numbers. Elsewhere, we had the KSW 67 card from Poland. Excuse me. Our very own Matt Bricker posted the results, and he rightly say it was an eventful day at the KSW 67 weigh-ins on Friday morning in Poland. The heavyweight fight was confirmed. However, the fighter wasn't medically cleared, and 3 fighters missed weight. All getting fined a percentage of their purse. But in the main event, Phil de Vries defeats Darko Stosic by submission to strikes in round 5. Phil de Vries still doing it. He has had a long and storied career. UK stalwart, 35 years old. He's been in the UFC. I think he's fought in he's fought once in Bellator, undefeated since 2017. He didn't have the best UFC career, to be honest. I think he struggled. He lost to Miocic, lost to Todd Duffy, lost to Mitrione. These are not bad losses. But since joining KSW, the guy's been on a tear. He's 7-0. With only two fights that have gone the distance, and one of them was against UFC alumni Luis Enrique. To beat Darko Stosic, who again, Darko Stosic is a phenomenal fighter. Again, didn't probably have the best of times in the UFC, but went 1-3 in the UFC. But since joining KSW, he's got 3 victories, and they're all good victories as well. But Phil de Vries, we always have to say, if you join the heavyweight division, if the UFC or Bellator, how would he do? I think he'd do reasonably well in Bellator, and I think he'd get exposed slightly in the UFC. And that's purely just because, he is the wrong side of 35, Phil de Vries. And with that being said, he's a great fighter. And he's, like I say, he's still doing it at 35. He's still, he's getting these young guys to tap. Darko Stosic is not an old guy. He's only 30, and in heavyweight terms, it's nothing really. And he's still managing to sort of almost old man these young guys, and it's really great to see, to be honest, especially from a UK MMA point of view. Phil de Vries still doing it. And in the co-main event, we had Adrian Bartonowski, Bartosinski. I apologize if I've butchered the pronunciation of that. Progressing to 12-0. Don't be surprised to see him in the UFC in the coming years. He's got 12 victories, undefeated, 10 victories by way of finish, 9 knockouts and submission. And he's got a very good amateur record. He started on the sort of the local scene, as it were, in Poland, and and now he's 3-0 in KSW, all of them by finish. And on Saturday night he got a knee bar finish, which we don't see very often. So he's clearly apt at on the ground. He's clearly got heavy hands, and yeah, these Polish fighters coming over from KSW to the UFC. He's only 26 years old. Do well. Karolina Kovacevic had a title shot back at UFC 205. Jan Blachowicz, former UFC light heavyweight champion. I think Joanna also fought in KSW. I'd be surprised if she didn't. I'll double check that now. Okay, I am surprised. Yeah, she didn't fight in KSW, but these Polish fighters that are fighting in KSW and coming over to the UFC are doing extremely well. And also, okay, so now we'll move on to discuss the UFC that went down this weekend. In the main event, Islam Makhachev defeated Bobby Green via TKO in the first round. It doesn't come as a surprise to many, to be honest. Bobby Green took the fight on a little over a week's notice. The fight was contested at 160 pounds because Bobby Green taking it on short notice don't make the guy struggle to make weight, because at the end of the day he's almost doing Islam Makhachev a favor by keeping Makhachev on the card. The fight is what it is. I think that fight was always really going to go that way. Islam Makhachev is elite when it comes to wrestling. He's got that sort of marauding strength, marauding power that not many people are going to be able to deal with. And he called for a title shot, and I saw MMA Fighting put a picture on this morning or last night about how big a favorite Islam Makhachev has opened up against Charles Oliveira, which is extremely interesting to see. Because that's probably what is going to be next. It's difficult to say where he goes other than a title shot now. He's on a 10 or 11 fight winning streak. He's ranked number 4. I wouldn't be surprised to see him ranked maybe number 3 or possibly even number 2. If you just look down the lightweight rankings, obviously Charles Oliveira is the champion, and we understand that he's going to be fighting Justin Gaethje next. And then you got Dustin Poirier. I think that would be a phenomenal fight. Dustin Poirier versus Islam Makhachev. Book it. That would really prove. The slight sort of tarnish to Makhachev's record is that really he hasn't fought any top guys. That I'd say his best win is Dan Hooker. But Dan Hooker took that on short notice. It's still a phenomenal win, don't get me wrong, but he holds wins over Drew Dober, who isn't a top guy, unfortunately. Thiago Moises in the main event. It's a strange main event, but it is what it is. That was not a top guy, and I think he got to probably feel a little hard done by that Beneil Dariush did have to pull out with an injury, because that is a top guy for him to get on his record. I think he would have been a much tougher fight against Dariush than it was against Bobby Green. But it is what it is. At least he's got to stay on the card and he put on another dominant victory. For Bobby Green, what's next? I'm not sure. It's I want to see him on I want to see him on the main card on a pay-per-view. He deserves it. He saved this card, because outside of the main event, it was pretty dicey as far as star power is concerned. And Bobby Green did save the card, essentially. I think we need to give him a fairly big fight next in order for him to possibly break into that top 15. And Alexander Hernandez obviously coming off the submission. I think it was a submission loss against Renato Moicano a few weeks back on the same card as Bobby Green. That would make sense. Or even a Renato Moicano. I don't think It'd be difficult to say that Bobby Green deserves a top 10, top 15 opponent. And I don't think many top 15 opponents take it. It's difficult unless it's, maybe a Brad Riddell coming off the loss to Fiziev. I think he probably takes the fight because he just loves to fight. And I think that would be an absolute banger of a fight, Brad Riddell versus Bobby Green. But for Islam Makhachev, it's Dustin Poirier or the title next, without a doubt. It's difficult to say where he goes elsewhere from that, but it is what it is. In the co-main event, we had Wellington Turman throw one of the quickest arm bars I think I've ever seen against Misha Cirkunov. He was losing the fight, and he goes from struggling on his back to stood on his feet with his arms raised within 5 seconds. It was a phenomenal armbar. He threw it up so quickly, and it definitely caught Misha Cirkunov by surprise. Cirkunov now drops to, I think it's 0-4, 0-3, sorry, in his last three, and 0-2 since moving down to middleweight. What do you do with Misha Cirkunov next is difficult. He does hold a win over Jimmy Crute, but outside of that, it's difficult. I imagine he probably stays at middleweight for one more. And if he can't get the win, I think that's probably he calls time on his UFC career at least. Priscilla Cachoeira and Ji Yeon Kim. It's a fun fight, very fun fight. I don't think the right woman won. I think Ji Yeon Kim landed the more effective shots throughout and was catching Cachoeira as she came in. Both ladies left it all in there, however, and Priscilla Cachoeira did get a hand raised in the end, but that's very contentious as well. But I can also a unanimous decision. I'm surprised that all three judges saw it 29-28, and there wasn't a single judge that saw it in favor of Kim, but it is what it is. And then arguably the performance of the night came from Arman Tsarukyan, who brutally dominated Joel Alvarez. I picked Alvarez, to cause the upset against Arman Tsarukyan. But that elbow on top of on the bridge of the nose, sort of, on the right in between the eyes in the first round, was the beginning of the end. They could barely stem the bleeding, and just a phenomenal performance by Arman Tsarukyan. And the guys are probably 25 years old, and he's 5-1 in the UFC, with his only loss coming to Islam Makhachev by decision in a fight of the night. He's got back-to-back performance of the night bonuses now. He did miss weight against Matt Frevola, which is certainly, an asterisk next to his name. But with that being said, it was only by 1 pound. So not that it's ever acceptable to miss weight, but it's not a huge weight miss. He called out Gregor Gillespie and said that Gillespie's been ducking him. Sign me up to that. I think that would be absolutely phenomenal. Tsarukyan's ranked 13 and Gregor Gillespie's ranked, these rankings are all over the place. It says number 9 on the UFC website, but he's at the number 10 position because him and Conor McGregor both hold the number 9 spot for whatever reason. I think that's a fight that makes sense. Both guys are fringe top 10 competitors. Gregor Gillespie's been a lot, probably fought the better opposition than Arman Tsarukyan, and Arman Tsarukyan needs to step up in competition. I think, at 25 years old, with the wrestling ability that he has, he could be a real problem in the lightweight division. And the future is bright, and the future is exciting for Arman Tsarukyan. And talking about the future, let's move on now to this weekend's card, UFC 272 from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Finally, we get the grudge match that we've all been wanting for a number of probably years now. Jorge Gamebred Masvidal, Street Jesus, versus Colby Chaos Covington, one of the most controversial stars in the UFC ever, let alone just at the moment. The card itself, we've got Covington and Masvidal headline, and we've got the 5-round main event. 5-round co-main event between Rafael dos Anjos and Rafael Fiziev, which is supposed to headline the card 2 weeks ago. And there's obviously now the co-main event in this fight on this card. Edison Barboza meets Bryce Mitchell at featherweight in a brilliant clash of styles. Kevin Holland makes his welterweight debut against Alex Oliveira. We've got Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy. Jalen Turner and Jamie Mullarkey headline in the prelims. Marina Rodriguez and Yao Shangnan not even making the main card. Phenomenal. We've got Marina Munoz versus Agapova in the grudge match. These two women used to train, and they went very, very personal in the sort of build up to this fight. That's certainly going under the radar. We've got Ludwig Klein versus Devontae Smith on the card. Brian Kelleher versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Tim Elliott returns after injury and surgery. Michael Oleksiejczuk versus Dustin Jacoby. We assume that Manon Fiorot will stay on the card, even though Jessica Wright has pulled out. So, obviously a replacement is being sought at the moment, I believe. And if not, I imagine the bout will just be rescheduled. But it's all about the main event. Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal, two former training partners at ATT. They've cornered each other. They've trained together hundreds of times. These guys were best friends. And the relationship split, and now these two do not like each other. And it's not like these two don't like each other because they're going to fight. These two don't like each other, and it goes deep, it goes personal. I saw an interview with, I think it was Mark Ramundi, was interviewing Jorge Masvidal, and he said, what do you expect the headline to be after your fight with Colby Covington? And I don't want to misquote Jorge, so I don't want to misquote Jorge, so I want to get the exact right quote. But give me 2 seconds. I'll just it's shocking quote, to be honest. He said, Colby Covington. I just really don't want to misquote Jorge because of the quote that he did. But Matt Ramundi asked, "What's the headline on March 6th after the fight?" And Jorge replied, "Colby in critical condition, might not fully make it." Now let that sink in. That is the mindset that Jorge Masvidal is taking into this fight. Colby in critical condition, might not fully make it. He doesn't just want to go out there and beat Colby Covington. He wants to go out there and hurt Colby Covington. And, this isn't like when Jorge Masvidal fought Kamaru Usman, when they had a rivalry over a competitive nature. Of course, they had the competitive nature, and that's where the rivalry stemmed from. This stems from two people that dislike each other. This is John Jones, Daniel Cormier stuff. Bitter rivalries, and it's going to be put to bed on Saturday night in front of the T-Mobile Arena. I have an article coming out on, I think it'll come out on Wednesday, about Jorge Masvidal's keys to victory, a little video breakdown of Jorge Masvidal's keys to victory. I'll give you a slight insight to how I think the fight's going to go. Unfortunately for Masvidal fans, I think Colby dominates and wins by decision. Jorge Masvidal's cardio is not the best in the world, and Colby's is one of the best in the world. We saw that quote from Colby saying he's got 2 lungs, which is why his cardio is so good. Just read into that what you will about his intelligence, but Colby Covington, it has one of the best wrestling games that you will see in the UFC. Although his accuracy is only 46%, he lands 4.1 takedowns on average per 15 minutes, which would suggest that, yes, he might not be successful with the first, the second, or the third, but with the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, he's relentless in his pursuit of the takedown. And we've seen that, against Robbie Lawler, he took him down 10 times. He took Robbie Lawler down 10 times. He took Brian Barberena down 12 times. RDA, he took down 7 times. Although he wasn't accredited with it, we all saw that he took Kamaru Usman down in their second fight, in Colby's last fight. So for Jorge Masvidal, my keys to victory mostly center around the takedown and the threat of the takedown from Colby. Whenever the fight gets into the clinch, Jorge has to punish Colby Covington. Land the knees, land the elbows, land the strikes, land the slaps to the ear. Play it a little bit dirty, because we know that Colby isn't afraid to sort of moan to the referee about a sort of an underhand tactic, and Jorge is experienced enough to just do enough so that the referee doesn't see what he's doing. Put your hands in the glove, annoy Colby Covington, because an angry Colby Covington is likely going to provide a lot more sloppy Colby Covington. When the fight gets to the clinch, which it inevitably will do at some point in this fight, Jorge cannot rest. It's not a resting position for Jorge Masvidal, because Colby Covington will just do enough in the clinch to keep that position. And likely when Jorge inevitably gets taken down, if that's what Colby Covington wants to do to him, do not settle on the floor. It's not a resting position for Jorge Masvidal. We saw him against Kamaru Usman almost accept the takedown and rest on the floor ever so slightly in their first fight. He can't do that against Colby Covington, because Colby will just do enough to stay on top. He'll just land enough sort of body strikes. He'll just land enough cuffing shots to the head to stay on top of Jorge Masvidal and almost waste out the round, as it were. Masvidal has to get back to his feet, and it's something that he did very well against Usman. As soon as there was a tiny little bit of space, he has to accentuate that space, land on Colby, get Colby backing up ever so slightly, so that he can then get back to his feet and start working his stand-up game, because Masvidal does have the more impressive stand-up. But the key for Masvidal in all of this is to avoid the clinch, to avoid the takedown. It's to stay in open space and try his best not to be backed up by Colby Covington. And the best way to do that is land hard and land heavy early, because it will deter Colby Covington. We've seen him against Robbie Lawler, we've seen him against Tyron Woodley, we've seen him against Kamaru Usman. Everyone he's fought, he has happily marched forward and met them in the center of the octagon, and more often than not pushed them back, because he has the cardio advantage, and he's not deterred by the shots that they've landed on him. Jorge Masvidal has to land on Colby Covington hard early and stay in the open space. We saw against Tyron Woodley, when Colby Covington faced Tyron Woodley, that he sort of winged shots in to winging big overhands to get himself into the clinch, to sort of try and work the takedown. That cannot happen if you're Jorge Masvidal. You've got to be able. He's not the best at cutting the angle. A lot of the time he accepts backing up rather than trying to cut an angle and coming out the side door. He's got to work on that against Colby, because if you back up in straight lines against Colby Covington, he'll snatch your legs and take you down. And a good way not to get backed up is to use the explosion that Jorge Masvidal's become famous for. The explosion against Ben Askren is what it is. Does he do that against Colby? Can you imagine? I think that would cement Jorge Masvidal into the UFC Hall of Fame if he did that again. No, but it's the explosion against Darren Till, which is, I think, will be quite important. The 3 or 4 punch combination exploding from the cage into the middle of the octagon, or from the octagon pushing Colby back to the cage. We saw it knock Darren Till out pretty convincingly, and I think that it's a move in his arsenal, let's say, that he can really utilize, to land on Colby, to back Colby up, to make sure that he doesn't have his back against the fence. And if he does, explode out. And yes, none of the shots may land on Colby, but it will get Colby backing up at least. He also needs to use the teep kick. I think, the teep kick is notoriously a lot harder to counter from a wrestling point of view. It's a lot harder to counter and then take the opponent down. And we've seen Masvidal land this often. Leg kicks always, leg kicks never go unnoticed, especially by myself. Everyone knows I'm a big leg kick fan. And Masvidal's also got similar to how we saw Gegard Mousasi against Austin Vanderford, it was very square on with a narrow stance. Now, Masvidal has to have that narrow stance against Colby in order to, he can't stand with his legs too wide open, because that allows Colby to, if he's heavy on the lead leg, that like we've seen him, it allows Colby to snatch that lead leg and go for the single leg. He can't do that against Masvidal can't do that against Colby, because, like I say, he will snatch the single leg. But the fight itself is a phenomenal fight. It's fight week now, and there's already plenty of content. We'll have plenty of content up on MMASucka.com. And most importantly, I think, enjoy it. There'll more than likely be a press conference between the two. Jorge will be his usual stoic self. I don't expect Jorge to get too riled up, but trust me when I say Jorge wants blood. He's coming out for blood, and he won't settle until he's got it. It's a phenomenal fight, and that's the icing on the cake. And the cake itself involves Rafael dos Anjos versus Rafael Fiziev. 2 weeks in the making. This fight was meant to go down 2 weeks ago, and for whatever reason, it was put back to this pay-per-view card. I don't think anyone's complaining. We haven't seen Rafael dos Anjos in a long time. He made his return to lightweight against Paul Felder in a fight of the night back in November 2020, and we haven't seen him since then. He's 37 years old now, so we've got to ask how the cut down to lightweight will affect him. Obviously, we've seen him up at welterweight previously, but this guy is a former UFC lightweight champion. He is arguably the gatekeeper to Rafael Fiziev making it into the top 10, into the sort of top 5 of the lightweight division. Fiziev is one of the best Muay Thai kickboxers that we've ever seen in the UFC. He has such crisp technique that you'll very rarely see him overthrow, and if he does overthrow, it's because he's almost trying to corral his opponent he's almost intentionally overthrowing to get a read on his opponent. He's a much younger guy, Rafael Fiziev. It'll be his birthday on Saturday, so he'll be hoping for a birthday present off Rafael dos Anjos. He'll be 29 on Saturday. But if you just look down the stats, the takedown average for RDA is 1.93. So he lands an average of, let's say, 2 takedowns per fight, with an accuracy of just 37%, however. And then you look at the takedown defense of Rafael Fiziev is 95%. What that suggests to me is that this fight will most likely play out in a stand-up. What that further suggests is that Rafael Fiziev may have the upper hand. 5.35 strikes landed per minute against RDA's 3.49 strikes. With that being said, Rafael Fiziev absorbs a lot more strikes as well. He absorbs more strikes than he lands at 5.57. Despite this, I think Rafael Fiziev definitely has the advantage in the stand-up game. If we look down his last few fights, Mark Giacchese dominated in the stand-up fight of the night. Performance of the night against Renato Moicano, that's savage. I think it was a left hook, that savage left hook finish. He then put an absolute phenomenal fight of the night against Bobby Green. And then last time out, the spinning wheel kick KO of his former teammate or his teammate Brad Riddell in the last round performance of the night. Rafael Fiziev has such crisp technique, and it's against the crisp technique and the experience of Rafael dos Anjos. I think this one is a phenomenal fight. And what is interesting to see, Rafael dos Anjos has been in the UFC since 2008. 2008, he made his UFC debut against Jeremy Stephens. He's been in there with the best in the world. He's been in there with Donald Cerrone. He's been in there with Khabib. He's been in there with Pettis. He's been in there with Eddie Alvarez, Tony Ferguson, Neil Magny, Robbie Lawler, Covington, who's obviously on this card. He's gone 25 minutes with Kamaru Usman. He's gone 25 minutes with Leon Edwards. He's gone 25 minutes with Tony Ferguson when Tony Ferguson was in his prime. He went 25 minutes last time out against Paul Felder. Don't expect the cardio to ever be an issue for Rafael dos Anjos, whereas with Rafael Fiziev, it certainly could be an issue. If I was Rafael dos Anjos, I'd jump on Rafael Fiziev and make him work a lot in the first couple of rounds, because that might drain Fiziev ever so slightly. We saw him gas out slightly against Bobby Green, and that was only over 3 rounds. Now you've got an extra 10 minutes, and it's going to be an exciting fight. And I can't wait. I think that this one is going to, like I say, it's going to be exciting, and it's going to iron out a lot of issues, let's say, in the lightweight division. Rafael dos Anjos ranked number 6 at the moment. Rafael Fiziev ranked number 11 at the moment. I think the winner of this probably faces either a Michael Chandler or a Beneil Dariush. And then that you're looking at title shots again. Rafael dos Anjos, if he got another title shot, that would be one of the fairy tale stories of the UFC. Elsewhere on the card, like I said earlier, Edison Barboza versus Bryce Mitchell in a massive clash of styles. Bryce Mitchell will look to take Edson Barboza down. Edson Barboza will look to kick the head off of Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell undefeated in the UFC. He more often than not goes to decision. Three decision victories and three decision victories and a submission. Obviously, the twist over Matt Sales back in 2019. Edson Barboza, Bryce Mitchell is undefeated, but he has only had 14 fights. Edson Barboza is far from undefeated. He's got 10 losses on his record. Sorry, but he's had 32 fights and has been fighting in the UFC, almost as long as RDA. Like we said last time, he's been fighting in the UFC since 2010. Again, fought some of the best: Donald Cerrone, Paul Felder, Tony Ferguson, Anthony Pettis, Gilbert Melendez. That savage flying knee knockout of Beneil Dariush. Fought Khabib, fought Dan Hooker, fought Justin Gaethje, Paul Felder, and then dropped down to featherweight. Dan Ige, Makwan Amiakani. That was what it was. That strange knockout of Shane Burgos, where he knocked him out, and it almost took Burgos' body a moment to react to being knocked out. And then last time out, obviously, he was finished by Giga Chikadze. But if you look at the guys that have beaten him, Giga Chikadze, like I say, Dan Ige, Paul Felder, Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson, Donald Cerrone, Michael Johnson, these are all strikers. The only sort of wrestlers or jiu-jitsu guys that have beaten him, Kevin Lee, and that was Barboza certainly had his success in that fight. And Kevin Lee is a much more sort of college wrestling style than Bryce Mitchell's jiu-jitsu style, and Khabib Nurmagomedov, which you almost don't want to put into the conversation because he's in a different world of wrestling to anybody that we've ever seen. You can't compare him and Bryce Mitchell. I think Barboza might get this done, and it might be by knockout. Barboza's takedown defense is 78%, and Bryce Mitchell's accuracy is only 46%. Bryce Mitchell has never fought anyone the level of Edson Barboza. Unluckily for Bryce Mitchell, his last win came against Andre Fili, who has been fringe top 20, top 25 all his career. There's no disrespect to Andre Fili, but he's never been able to quite break into the top 15 with any gusto. And, I think that tells. And Edison Barboza has been in and around the top 5 of every division that he's fought in, and been competitive in every division that he's fought in since his introduction to the UFC in 2010. So I think Edison Barboza probably gets it done, and I'll probably pick it by late knockout. And it wouldn't be bad for Edison Barboza. We know he's got legendary leg kicks. It wouldn't be the worst tactic in the world against Bryce Mitchell, because Mitchell, if he does throw the leg kick, he can't throw it blind. He's got to throw it behind a jab or two, because otherwise Mitchell will look to just catch that leg and take him down. Kevin Holland versus Alex Oliveira, just enjoy it. It's none of these guys are going to get a welterweight title shot anytime soon. Alex Oliveira is coming off, I think, the loss to, Alex Oliveira is 0-3 in his last 3. He lost to Shavkat, he lost to Randy Brown, and he lost to Nico Price. Who cares? Keep this guy in the division. He's fun. He's got a captivating personality, and it's similar to Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland is he had that strange no contest against Carl Daukaus where they clashed heads, and I think Daukaus submitted Holland following that, or maybe got the TKO victory. On the tape, it's clear that Kevin Holland was knocked out following the clash of heads, and that was turned into a no contest. If Kevin Holland can recapture his 2020 form, he walks through Alex Oliveira. It'll be interesting to see what his weight cut down to 170 is like. Obviously, he's a 185er and has been for all of his UFC career, at least. We haven't seen him at 170 inside of the UFC. He has fought down at welterweight. It's he debuted at welterweight, and he was playing around between welterweight and middleweight. He fought Curtis Melender in the LFA at welterweight, and then he went back up to middleweight. This will be the first time he competes at welterweight since 2017. But he's never been the biggest guy in the world, so I think that the cut won't be too difficult for him. Let's just hope Sergey Spivak takes Greg Hardy down and mauls him and batters him for 15 minutes. That's all I can really say on that fight. The fight that I really want to look out for is Marina Rodriguez versus Yang Xiaonan. Rodriguez was my female fighter of the year last year, following the wins against Amanda Hebas, Michelle Waterston, and Mackenzie Dern. A phenomenal fighter. I think she is one of the best fighters on the roster at women's strawweight. But she's also fighting one of the best fighters on the roster at women's strawweight in Yang Xiaonan. Xiaonan, last time out, really, was dominated by Carla Esparza. There's no other word for it. She was outclassed and outworked and out everything by Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza did get the TKO that night. But Yang Xiaonan, she got wins over Angela Hill, Karolina Kovacevic, Claudia Gadelha. These are good wins. And, she's got a very, very high ceiling, Yang Xiaonan, but she is 32 now. And if she loses to Marina Rodriguez, which personally I'd assume that she does, it's difficult to know where she goes from there. With that being said, she's dominated pretty much every girl that she's fought so far. If we just she dominated Karolina Kovacevic 30-26 on all scorecards. Against Angela Hill, she dominated Angela Hill 29-28 on all scorecards. Claudia Gadelha 29-28 on all scorecards. And then, dating back to her debut, she was dominating girls on all scorecards. She's won every fight in the UFC that she has. Every fight that she's had in the UFC that she's won has been by unanimous decision. She's got 5 unanimous decisions, and obviously the TKO loss against Carla Esparza last time out. With that being said, Carla Esparza is a wrestler and Marina Rodriguez is a striker, which you'd assume Marina Rodriguez will potentially look to take Yang Xiaonan down. If I was Marina Rodriguez, that's what I'd look to do, take Yang Xiaonan down, because she was very much outclassed on the floor when she fought Carla Esparza. But she won't. We know Marina Rodriguez won't do that. She has a takedown average of 0.22. She's got a 33% takedown average. She doesn't take girls down. She looks to dominate on the feet. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this. In my opinion, will go 15 minutes, and I think it's going to be all action. You know, the girls between them, 5.05 and 5.95 strikes landed per minute, 3 and 3.61 strikes absorbed per minute. I think this is going to be all action for 15 minutes, and I do see Marina Rodriguez being a slightly crisper striker, landing the leg kicks, keeping Yang Xiaonan on the end of a long jab, and getting it done. And then probably getting a title shot later this year. I think she deserves it. The other fight on the card that I want to just highlight, I won't go into too much detail, but is Maria Agapova versus Marina Moroz. Agapova, obviously, 2-1 in the UFC. She dominated both opponents. She won, and she got the upset of the year against her when Shayna Dobson TKO'd her in August of 2020. This one goes down after both girls. They used to train together. It's going to be a strange one in my opinion because we've got the Ukrainian Moroz. Obviously, everything going on in Ukraine. She's 2-0 in her last 2 fights, Moroz, but she hasn't fought since 2020, March of 2020, on the Lee versus Oliveira card. And if you remember, that's the first card that was fought behind closed doors due to the pandemic. This one will be played out on the feet again. Both girls prefer life in the sort of striking range. They average less than a takedown per fight, but again, they average plenty of strikes per minute. 4.09 for Moroz, 5.2 for Agapova. Fortunately for Moroz, I think Agapova probably gets it done. With that being said, it's orthodox versus southpaw, so it'll be a slight clash of stances. And the girls both experienced, but Agapova is that crisper striker. I think she's got the heavier hands. Moroz, with that being said, is I believe she's a boxing coach for the Ukrainian Olympic women's team. So she's a phenomenal boxer. And you've got to look ahead and see who has the higher ceiling. I think it's Agapova has the higher ceiling. There's a lot of bad blood going into this one, so we'll have to see sort of where this fight, I won't say takes place, but we'll have to see where this fight is won and lost, whether it's won and lost as a result of one woman being too emotional or not. We'll have to see. I think it's going to be a phenomenal night of fights. On MMA Sucka this week, we've got plenty of stuff. We've got the Titan FC 74 card, CS 66, Cage Warriors 133, PFL Challenger Series. Obviously, we've got plenty of UFC 272 content coming out, including my video analysis of Jorge Masvidal's keys to victory. We got Rising Landmark 2, ACA 137. And we also have Chocolatito versus Martinez coming up. There is plenty of MMA action this week and a little bit of boxing action as well. And then, we'll look ahead. Hopefully Tim will be back next Monday and we'll break down the UFC 272 card. We'll pass comment on the main talking points. And then, we've got Invicta, we've got one championship, Gary Tonin, and finally, hopefully, getting the Fernandez-John Lineker fight. We've got Gary Tonin getting the lightweight championship shot there. We've got Eagle FC 46, where Kevin Lee will be making his debut against Diego Sanchez. Ray Borg versus Ricky Bandejas. Impa Kasangana is on the card. Anthony Hamilton's on the card. That's it. Erwin Rivera's on the card. That's a really good. And then we've got the Challenger Series 4, and LFA to look forward to. So there's plenty going on in the next couple of weeks of MMA action. But keep it locked to MMA Sucka, because we'll have all your previews, all your results. We'll have staff picks that are getting really close, are really interesting this year. So yeah, keep it locked to MMA Sucka. Follow MMA Sucka on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Please like, share, subscribe, and thanks. I'll speak to you next week.